Unpacking the Toolbox is a production of Shondaland Audio in partnership with iHeartRadio.
It's the Scandal Rewatch Podcast Show with Guillermo Diaz and Katie Lowe's.
Okay, so this episode it's so kick-ass that we've have two kick-ass guests to really hold it up.
We're going to talk to Tony Goldwyn.
And then we've got the one and only Zahir McGhee, who is a incredible writer. And he's going to give us like some hot goss into like what the hell was going on in the writer's room and all those people's minds.
What they thought of us.
How much they loved Huck and Quinn.
Katie, you're not even in LA right now.
I'm not in LA, and it's like, I miss you.
I miss you too, but Katie's got a job somewhere outside of LA. Can you say where you are?
Yeah, and it's going to come out soon. At the time of this recording, it was previous to the press release, but the press release will be coming out next week. And y'all, I'm in North Carolina, but I'm playing a Texan, and I have been working night and day on this accent. So apologies if I tend to be coming in and out of it.
I like it. It's so cute.
Oh, thanks, G. It's so ridiculous. Our job is so crazy. It's so fun. I mean, nobody will ever compare. It's so hard, isn't it?
Like to compare like jobs to Scandal.
Scandal will never
ever.
I've collected some wonderful artists and people on the jobs post Scandal, but you know, because I was the baby. I'm the youngest on Scandal. All the older people would always be like, this is lightning in a bottle. Nothing's ever existed like this in my career. And now I'm like, oh shit, yeah.
It's true. I just did a guest spot on a show that's been on for 7 seasons, and same thing. I mean, they were all really nice and lovely, and you know, they were running a tight ship, but it didn't have that energy that we had on our show. That like fun, like, you know what I mean? We were doing some intense stuff on the show, but we had so much fun with each other on set. You know?
I have to say, I did a show that I cannot say on this fucking podcast.
Yeah, I ain't saying shit.
It was a hit show at the same time that Scandal was a hit show, but it won all the awards. Okay, unlike Scandal, who did not win any, which is fucking bullshit. But anyway, it won all the awards, and I have to say, people can deduct this. I did a recurring on this show after Scandal, because I think it did like 1 or 2 more seasons after Scandal. And I just remember being on the set and like everybody was on their phones and everyone was like wildly successful and like so famous. So they probably had like a lot to do, right? Like they're just like so busy. And I just like looked around and I was like, I feel like on Scandal, we were literally hanging out all the time.
And listen, there were moments where we were all on our phones, but then like Josh Molina, someone would get up and he'd grab somebody's phone and tweet, "I'm horny." Like we were like, even, you know what I mean? We were having a blast.
I feel like we hung out and maybe
and we hung out a ton, on set and off. And,
we just like really were freaking tight, and it's really like. It's like somebody you go to sleepaway camp with or something. I feel like every time I see, I mean, obviously, thank God we get to see each other at a time. But even when I was texting Carrie, and it feels exactly like it did 7 years ago. Like it's when you go through something like that we've been through, it just feels like time picks up exactly where we last left off or something.
Exactly. Maybe the people on these shows that we didn't like us. Yeah. Maybe we were the problem. Maybe they were like, God.
I think you're right.
Let me just stay on my phone. This annoying Guillermo Diaz is here.
We ever treated the guest stars like shit?
No, we would treat them so nice. We treat them so nice. I remember every time a new person would come on, I would make a point to be like, hey, welcome. Like, we're so happy you're here. Like, you're great, you know.
Also, usually that guest star was like famous or had an unbelievable resume.
That's true.
Hi,
Zahir is here.
Oh, it rhymes.
It does.
Zahir is having technical difficulties, but he's our guest, and we should have teased him better than we did, because this is our very, very first writer, other than Shonda Rhimes herself, the queen, that we have had on the Scandal Rewatch podcast. I mean,
this is also...
Go, baby, go.
I was just going to say that Zahir is one of those writers that it felt like he was like a peer, right? Like it felt like he was like, like one of the guys, like one of us. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It felt like he was just hanging out with us on set, and that it was always so much fun.
Romola.
Yes,
like,
Romola.
There were just a
yes.
few like writers that when they would come on set, it wasn't like scary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and now that I think about it, there were so many. Sevi, and I mean, there were so many that were
Sevi,
super
the best.
chill.
Chris
and cool.
Van Dusen.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Matt Byrne.
Yeah.
Really,
Never mind. They were all great.
Really, it was just Shonda. It was just Shonda.
It was just
never.
She
but
was
when she did, it was terrifying.
Yes, because we were just trying to just be so good for her. We just wanted to make no mistakes.
Hi, Zahir McGhee. Zahir McGhee, you treasure of a human being that you are. We were saying, I don't know if you could hear it. You are our first writer that we have ever had on Unpacking the Toolbox, other than Shonda Rhimes' Queen Be Yourself.
You know that terrifies me, but thank you for having me.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know why. I think for listeners, listen, Zahir is a very, very key player writer to Scandal. But I also think because we see each other like every morning at drop off with our kids, that I was like, Zahir, you're very much at the forefront of my day to day. So yes, feel special, but also don't feel threatened.
I don't
It's
feel
just-
that threatened.
It's us two goofballs.
Yeah.
No, I've been a fan. I was so excited when the podcast came out, and I've been able to listen here and there. And obviously, like last week's episode was super awesome.
Are you the biggest fan? Just tell us you're the biggest fan of the Scandal Rewatch podcast.
I'm the biggest fan, for sure, and huge fans of you guys. I mean, I've this is a ridiculous story, but both of you, I brought my mom out to the Image Awards. This was during season 3, and both of you had very interesting interactions with her, and we were at the dinner the night before, and Guillermo, you kind of just on the way out, like sort of hit me on the back, and then she was like, I have to meet him, and I was like, oh God, like I work with these people, they're my colleagues, like whatever, but I like sprint over as you're trying to leave, and I'm like, yo, my mom is gonna lose it, please help me out, whatever. You did it, and I felt so bad because 120 people lined up at that point. You were this close to being done, and then I think we left before you. And then, which was incredible. And then Katie, you came over and talked to my mom for like 30 minutes. Okay.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
incredible. And then either we won that
I
year.
remember this.
This was incredible. We won that year or we didn't win. I can't remember. But you guys were like leaving early and the cast was going to go to dinner. And you came by again and you said goodbye to me and you said goodbye to my mom. My mom looks at me. This is like an hour after you had talked to her for 30 minutes. She goes, who's that? I go, that's Quinn, Mom. That's Katie.
Oh my.
And then she goes, well, why didn't you introduce me earlier? And I go, are you kidding, lady?
Did she just not
She just thought we were like friends outside, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, she didn't, because we were just like catching up and Adam's there and whatever. And it's like, we're old friends. So I don't think it dawned on her in the moment. But then after you win something or you're with the rest of the cast, then it was like, oh, wow. But also I looked in her notes and she was writing down everyone she met. Okay, and it wasn't like...
Where was her notes? Like in her phone or on a piece of paper?
In her phone, but it wasn't like
Cute.
Idris Elba. It was like guy from The Wire, right? Like man from...
Bless her.
Yeah, third man from Empire.
Oh my
Bless
stuff
God!
like that.
But
Anyway.
in her head, she knew exactly who those people were. She was like,
Yes.
"I know exactly who this third guy from Empire is."
But the writer in me can't help but go to the next part, which is when she's talking to her sorority sisters when she goes home. She doesn't say like Terrence Howard. She just says like guy from Empire. Right? Like that's her list. She's just running down guy from Empire.
Right.
You know, little
Was
girl
she
from Aquila and the Bee.
Proud of you. Like, just take us really quickly. Like, how did you get the Scandal job? How did you end up in Shondaland's universe? And also, was your mom? I mean, because I feel like my parents, when people ask you, what does your kid do? And they tell you you're an actor and they're like, okay, great. Like, have I seen her in anything? And then when your parents are able to drop the Scandal bomb,
They're
it's
like, oh.
such a flex.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I need to hear your whole origin Shondaland story.
So it's a kind of an interesting one that is pretty linear. So it's not interesting that way. Just sort of the circumstance that sort of happened, which is I went to USC. I mean, I'll spare you sort of the other stuff, you know, working in the mortgage business and destroying that business and then deciding I wanted to be in TV and film. But I come and I go to USC, crazy. Interestingly enough, Shonda gave me my diploma in 2009.
What?
Like she was like the ambassador for the writing program, and so she gave out like the 30 diplomas to the writing students. Okay, great. A ton of stuff goes by. I get a job at the Image Awards. I'm just sort of like trying to figure out what the next year is going to be. And then I did a couple like fellowship things and crappy jobs, and then I got into the Disney Fellowship. So I was one of the 8 writers picked for that in 2010. So that's obviously amazing because they pay your salary, right? And they're paying you a certain amount. It was like $50K, which at that point I was like, oh my God, are you kidding? I remember I bought a pair of glasses and I was like, I'm going to buy a pair of $200 glasses. I've made it, you know?
Right. And, that's big.
That was amazing. And then you go up for these shows, and I was up for a job on Private Practice, and I met with these guys, Craig Turk and Steve Blackman, and then Hammer, also Mark Wilding, who was, worked with us on Scandal as well. So I met with both of them for a job on Grey's Anatomy and Private Practice. So to bring it back to my mom, I call afterwards. She's like, how did it go? And then I'm like, oh, I don't know. I think it went well. And she's like, God, I really hope it's Grey's Anatomy. I'm like, okay, great. So anyway, I get the job on Private Practice. I call my mom and I'm like,
way to jinx it, Mom.
I got the job on Private Practice. But I will say that's the show I wanted for reasons that I just sort of like, Grey's just felt like such a juggernaut at that point. Like, I just thought, like, I just envisioned like I'm going to get like eaten by a whale, or, I'm Icarus with wax wings or something. Like, it was just not going to end well.
Scary.
And so Private was this incredibly awesome experience. And I don't even know where I got the courage to say.
What season did you start on
Right?
Private?
Did you write Katie's episode?
Oh, wait, which one? Katie, which one did you do?
Yeah, Katie
I was
did
the
one.
lead guest star on season 4, the premiere episode where I left a baby. Yep.
In the car. You left the baby in the car?
I left that motherfucking baby in the car to asphyxiate and die.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and then you wanted another baby.
And I wanted another baby. And the director was, what's his name, who directed Scandal 2? Help. Oh, God, guys.
Tinker.
Tinker.
Mark Tinker.
Mark Tinker directed it. And that was my first experience in Shondaland, too. Did you write on that episode?
I was definitely, I was there that season. I definitely didn't write the premiere. I'm sure that had to be Shonda or one of the other head honchos. I was a staff writer at that point. I remember that being a big story that we were really into, because that show was like moral and like ethical debates, right? So you had come back to us and said you wanted to have a baby.
Anyway, so then how do you go from Private Practice to Scandal?
Yeah.
So, I remember in season 6, and Private was an awesome, awesome experience with awesome, awesome people. And we got to season 6, and I'd written an episode earlier in the year, and then I wrote another episode, like episode 611, which was like 2 before we were done. And I just remember at the table read, Shonda like walks by me and like goes like, we need to talk about your future. And I'm like, my future? I have a future? But I was like kind of excited about it. But really, you're also like, what does future mean, right? Like that could mean like you're done here,
like,
right? Like
I'll
never see you again.
We would all think that. Yeah.
So I was like a complete psycho. And I was a complete psychopath about this. I just was like, I show up before everyone and I leave later than everyone. I was in like that mode for sure, which would come as a shock to my colleagues at Scandal over at the end of our Scandal run.
But at that point, you'd been doing fucking 14 years of network TV. You earned
you're just
it.
like,
you earned being a fuck up. It's fine.
So we go totally. And so then one day she like, I can picture it so clearly. She walks by and she like pokes her head in, but she continues on to her office. Then she like kind of comes back and then she sits down and she just goes, do you want to go work on Scandal? And I think I made some joke that didn't land. And I was like, frankly, though, terrified. Like, in this business, like you want to like make it. And I don't know how you guys felt like when you were on Scandal, but like you want the train to start moving. But then some point you're like, oh, man, do I have control of this? Right. Like, is it going to stop again? Am I going to catch my bearings? Right. Like, is this all moving too fast? So I was kind of in my head like, oh, crap, like whatever. We all know the money is like never, ever enough. But at the time, I'm like, I've made more money than I ever thought I would make in my life. Like, I can't wait to chill, figure out what I want to write, like take 6 months off. Like, I don't know, like have a life, something like that. And then you're like that opportunity. I made some dumb joke. And then, of course, the answer was yes. The crazy part was I had to like catch up real time. So the last 2 weeks of Private Practice before we end, I'm moving immediately to Scandal in mid-season, right? So you guys are like,
what season? Yeah, what season were we on?
Season 2. So you guys are, wow. I come, you've shot everything. You probably shot the first 8 in season 2, which is when the show is like,
oh, wow,
skyrocketing out of control.
Juggernaut.
I don't know what's aired yet, so I don't know if we were like in like hit zone on the air yet, or if you guys
you're
were.
talking like the storylines.
The storylines,
epic.
So I'm like, there's robot guns, Huck's accused of this and whatever. I'm like, meanwhile, I'm just writing a doctor show about like who left a baby in a car and are we going to give someone another baby? And like doctors are like making out a little bit, like who's going to touch who tonight on private practice. So it's like all sort of like fun and wonderful, and I love it. And then I'm like, oh no. This is so intense, so we have to read them back to back to back. We get to episode 10 and you guys are having the writer's table read for episode 10, which is, of course, like an infamous, notorious, amazing episode of Scandal in which Tony, I believe that's the one where he, chokes Verna.
What happened?
That's he kills Verna.
Oh, shit. That's a great one. Yeah.
So I go in and I go, hey, I email Shonda and I say, is it okay if I come to the writer's table read? Otherwise, I know the scripts aren't distributed. I'm like, I have to be caught up for when I get in the room.
Yeah, you might as well come to the read. Yeah.
So I come to the read with the writers only, though. So I'm meeting the writers for the first time.
Everyone listen to this. This is new knowledge for this podcast, which I didn't find out till later. Gee, did you know this? That they would do a writer's table read where they would play our parts before we would get the script.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Like Jenna Bands, one of the wonderful writers on Scandal, like always read Quinn. I didn't know this until like season 2 or 3 where Jenna was like, oh, at the writer's table read? I was like, what the fuck is the writer's table read? But it's like every writer, like I think, Jess Brownell always played Quinn, I think too, in later years. But like they would read it amongst themselves to see like what was working or not before we got it.
Who played Huck? Who played Huck, Z?
I can see in the later seasons, Juan did a lot of Huck, I think.
Oh,
nice.
For sure. Juan Carlos, who was our script coordinator for an incredibly long time. The early seasons, I can't remember.
See, didn't you do Joe? Didn't you do Papa Pope?
I did a lot of Joe stuff over the course of my time there. But you really had to get into it, and like it was like you really. I mean, this is something that like I'm sure you guys have talked about on the show too. And watching this episode, I felt the same way, which is like the passion that you guys had at the table, and then every single thing. I mean, I used to say to Joe sometimes, to be like, "Oh my God, thank you for making that sound normal," or making that sound like it was something that was like profound, because like you're writing it going like, "Oh no," and we are not you guys. We're just sort of insular, insecure writers. So like it's a lot to really like sell it. But at the same time, like part of what made the scripts alive too was everything was sort of a sell job. Not a sell job in like a bad way, but
no,
like
you had to commit. If you didn't commit, if you didn't commit to the situation and the circumstance with what you've got, like it fell flat. And you guys knew that. Like you couldn't just sort of, a lot of other shows I've been on at the table reads, like actors sort of like half-ass
they just
They're
read
like
it.
mumbling. It's like, I don't even know what the fuck's going on. There's no
Yeah.
relationship. I swear to God, these Scandal table reads, and it sounds like these writers reads, they were like a fucking Broadway show.
Yeah.
Like people were playing for like a 300 seat fucking audience. Like it was crazy.
Did they tape your reads? Did they tape your reads?
No,
it was just for you guys to hear it. Yeah.
It would be an interesting exercise for absolutely no one to do this. But if you guys saw the scripts that we read for, with Shonda, for Shonda, they would be so different than what you guys got. And then eventually what made it to air. You guys know that we were sort of always working, so did they tape them? No. And frankly, we were just not at the caliber, of course, of what you guys were doing, but we just tried our best, and it was just fun to write.
Pay to see your Joe Moore, pay to see your Papa Pope. Okay, so wait, so Shonda lets you into the writer's room on the big Verna death episode.
Yes.
And what happens?
We read this. I must be sweating. Like I must be visibly sweating. Just like being like, I'm just completely like, I'm just like, this is so insane. I can't do it. And then all I remember, like, so in my cold sweat, they get to the end and it's just like, this table read does crack, right? Like these guys, like it's a crazy episode. Everyone sells it. Everyone seems really happy about it. And then on the way out at the door, she's like, so what do you think? And I'm like, what is the right answer here? And I was just like, all I could come up with was like, basically like, damn, that's crazy. Like, that's all I got. So now I can tell you, I go back to private practice that day to like finish work there. And I'm like talking to all the writers there. And I'm like, I am going crazy. I'm not going to be able to do this. This is so out of my league. Like just sort of not out of my league, but like just sort of like different than
just
what I have been doing.
It's overwhelming.
Not your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it. And then so they're just like, it's December. I started in December. They're like, it's December. You'll just like, go there. It's 2 weeks before Christmas break. You like, you know,
Get
That's
through the
true.
two
know
weeks.
how to like pitch shit. You know how to like whatever, get to know everyone, see what the vibe is. Like the train is already moving. They already know what
Yeah.
they're doing.
Right.
I show up day one, walking to the room. I turn the corner and Mark Fish is standing there. He's like, oh, hey, I heard you were coming. I'm like, oh, yeah, my name's Zahir. It's nice to meet you. He's like, so happy to have you here. We really need to use your brain since we don't have anything broken for the back half. And you're like, I'm sorry, wow.
Shit. And you're like,
literally-
the pressure is like, oh, fuck.
I know. And you're just sort of like, oh, I thought I was going to get the show for 2 weeks. And then the next day was basically like, everyone come in with your conspiracy for the back half. I'm like, conspiracy? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. A baby was born at 26 weeks and I don't know. Like, I just
Not
like have
gonna work
no
here.
like, it's
Not
just
gonna work
so-
here. That is so crazy.
Wow.
I
Trial by
also
fire,
for the
for sure.
listeners, yeah, all the listeners, like, I think we've touched on this before, but it's so great to have to hear on this. But like, Scandal is so different than I think how other episodic TV shows go, where they would start a season and like the whole season is broken, right? Like, you know, the general arc for everybody's character, all the big beats you're going to, see. And then it's just really about getting from A to B to C to da da da. On Scandal, the reason I think that the show felt so like gun to your head, OMG moments is because you guys were figuring them out in real time, correct? Deadlines?
Oof.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always look. We definitely knew. I mean, we definitely knew big stuff, right? Like there was stuff that we sort of talked about, and there were things that were sort of in the air, and some directives from Shonda and vice versa that were kind of you tried to lean towards those, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it was super organic, and a lot of it felt like responsive in a lot of ways, and a lot of it was just sort of like coming up with the best idea. And one thing that works incredibly, like in addition to you guys really just being super talented and committed to everything, was that room was like, forgetting the crazy, like the story and the type of story we're doing, and it's a sort of like thrillery, fast-paced thing, and we're doing 80 scenes and crazy stuff. The talent in that room, right? Like, I mean, Jenna and
I want to hear
Pete
about that.
and Alan and, Hammer and Mark Fish and, Paul, Chris,
Chris, yeah.
these, like, we're talking about like 8,
Yeah.
9 showrunners, right? Who are going to go on to run the shows. And so like Heather, you know what I mean? Like Matt Byrne,
the
like
room-
it's just
I know,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
you're talking about such heavy hitters where like there was no
duds.
everybody was
There were no
so
duds, right?
brilliant in their
Yeah.
own right, and every writer in there was capable of having 8,000 shows within their own brain. Like it was so
It's
amazing.
super talented, not a bad writer in the bunch.
explain to our listeners that Scandal also wasn't written, like, even though there was somebody's name on each episode, is Scandal different from other shows in that a lot of episodes were like a group effort? Like you take a scene, you take a scene, you take a scene, or was it not like that? And I'm remembering incorrectly.
Well, I don't know how much of this is
Allowed.
the public of knowledge
yeah.
or whatever.
Gotcha.
I'll just say
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
absolutely. I'll say absolutely. In terms of comparing it to the other shows I've worked on, 1,000% far and away the most collaborative show I've worked on.
I love that.
That's so cool. God, it sounds like your writer's room was like kind of similar to our
So the cast, right?
acting
To like
gang in
our
a way,
life
which
on
is so
set. Yeah.
interesting. And for all of you guys too, like, so you would have your own office. Each writer had their own office, and then you would have like a group like living room, hangout room. Am I making this up, or was it a conference table? Like, are you? And then would you gather every day and like break it together, and then like go off to your own offices, and then like, is that? I don't know about this world at all.
Oh, well, it's different on every show. And just going back to what I was saying before, it is without question, this was the most collaborative environment that I worked in. But by and large, I've only twice have I worked in conference table writers' rooms, and they just make me ill.
Oh, wow.
I'm a big like just like couch and individual table thing. I'm also like a little bit of like a psychotic, have to be in the same seat. I can't concentrate
To
if
be
I have
able
to
to
move
write.
one
Yes,
seat to the
yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah,
I
it's
get
weird.
that.
Yes.
But
I get that.
But so we have a writer's room. So we have our offices, and then we have a writer's room. Scandal was a hugely room heavy show. So we were there in the room, anywhere between 6 to 10 hours, more sometimes a day.
Fuck.
And we did everything together.
No wonder you were so fucking
Who's
close.
keeping track of these timelines and fucking just the
Oh.
storylines and everything, right? Like, was that
A researcher or like a
oh my
assistant?
God.
Or like,
Because it was even hard for us to keep track. We would do scenes, and I'd be like, Katie, I don't know, like what has happened to
do we
Huck?
like each
what's
other, or do
happening?
we hate
like,
each other right
where
now?
are
Like,
we in
would
the
be like,
story?
yeah.
You know what I mean?
yeah.
If someone said to me, explain one conspiracy from Scandal beginning to end right now, and I'll give you like 5 million, right? I wouldn't be able to do it. Yeah, if they were like, we're going to kidnap your entire, Huck and Quinn are going to kidnap your entire family and torture them, but you just
like,
have to tell us
sorry,
beginning
I got
to end.
nothing.
Give me the mole storyline beginning to end accurately. I'd be like, I'm sorry,
Oh my God.
I have no idea.
The mole.
Take them.
We just went through that, and I was like, what
is
going on?
happening?
There's Thorngate.
Yes.
There's
Thorngate's-
Thorngate. There's Mole. There's a war of a made up country that I can't remember
Kashvar.
that name. Kashvar.
Kashvar.
Like, how did you make up? Also, how did you come in? Oh my God, we have to talk about this episode. But I'm like obsessed with everything you're talking about
this.
writing. Me too.
This is so interesting.
Can you
all
tell
this
me
stuff.
like how you made up?
West
or do you
Angola,
remember?
sorry.
West Angola. Who made up like the Gettysburger or like these staple iconic right and, or like the Beaujolais wine, which is a bullshit name of a wine. Like these were things that I'm like, who the fuck made this shit up? Unbelievable.
Well, the job, as much as we've talked about how awesome the job is like really hard also, and it's like a lot of pressure, as I've sort of talked about.
God,
so I think a lot of what we did was you are entertaining one another, your brothers and sisters who you're like sort of living with every day. So I used to remember like who did what. Like even watching this episode, I can kind of be like, oh, I remember who wrote this scene or, whatever the case may be. Oh, for sure. And who came up with this pitch. And names were the way that we always entertained one another. Like even in the episode 310, there's some like her one of her aliases is like Margot Bouvier. And I was I know that was a joke. And I don't know who it was to make laugh, but like whatever. So Gettysburger, I don't know, but it's usually like what happens is if we go off to write, and you come back and someone has a scene, they'll just have it in the scene. And it's just something that when we do the writer's table read, everyone goes, ah, like just loses their mind.
And it sticks. And it sticks, right? Or it doesn't.
And you're like,
yeah.
whatever. Yeah, or it's something that, Chanda comes back to the room with and she'll say and it sticks and it's just you kind of know what those moments are going to be, and then a lot of the things surprise you with Scandal. So it really was like, again, like super collaborative. Like some of the big stuff, like thinking about like Maya chewing her arms off or whatever to get out of prison 2 episodes before, you're like, I can remember so clearly how we came up with that. And again, it's just the sort of like organic, semi-organic, because there's the gun of the deadline to your head, but it's in a lot of, I hate to say stuff like this, but like in a lot of ways it just felt like magic, And
we will be back with more after the break.
Are there like your top 3 moments that you feel like you either wrote or co-wrote more like they were a scene heavy that you really touched with your talent that you're so proud of?
What did my mom think of Scandal? She loved Scandal, and I think she loved, that the cachet that it brought her at home.
Yes.
My dad was always like, kind of played this role of like, I don't watch that. Like, why? The man's the president of the United States, and he's willing to give all that up for her. Like he just was in like super masculine mode
that's
about
not realistic.
That's not realistic. You wouldn't do that. But then I went home one time, and I was out of the room. And my dad's phone just kept going off. And I'm like, this is so annoying. This is so annoying. Like, why isn't this man here? Old people, who leaves their ringer on? Like, why can't it just be on silent? And then I go over to finally shut it off. And it just is an alarm for Scandal. So, like, he would remind himself to watch. So he would pretend like to me that he didn't watch. But then.
And he was like, I got to watch my son's show. Wow. I love that.
And so in terms of like the things, and I'll just sort of say the things I'm proud of and
yes, and they can be episodes. It doesn't even have to be moments. What do you think?
Everything in the lawn chair is like obviously like so the fact that we pulled that together. Everything about that episode, I'm so grateful for. My own contributions and Cornelius coming into the show in that episode, and the speech that the cop gave at the end. Are you the name
on that episode?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's Zahir's episode. Like that episode is one of the all-time greatest, most prolific, and we are having you back on. It will be you and Courtney B. Vance, who I'm going to get. Zahir, this is so...
It's so interesting,
I'm so
right?
interested in this. Like, I can't even tell you, but we're going to talk about 310 really quick because I know you were on set and I know you remember a lot of this episode and you watched.
Yes.
Oh my God, you're the greatest. Okay, we are talking today about episode 310, A Door-Marked Exit, which aired on December 12th, 2013.
And it was written by Zahir McGhee and directed by Tom Verica, the Tom Verica.
It was guest starring Candy Alexander as Maya Lewis, Julia Cho as Shelby Moss,
Erica Schaefer as Anchor, and Paul Edelstein as Leo Bergen.
And how do you feel about reading in Scandal pace?
Sometimes
That's
we'll
all
ask
right,
our
right,
guests if they
Zahir?
want to read the synopsis in Scandal pace. Do not feel pressure. Me and Katie fuck it up all the time, but
We don't
sometimes
fuck
it's
it up.
fun. Something you could say no and we'll read it. Like, it's all good.
I'm happy to give it a try. This will be
Come
embarrassing.
on, you can do it.
Okay.
Try.
Okay.
Zahir.
All right.
Okay.
All right. As Olivia races to learn everything she can about her mother's past in the Plainland, Cyrus works to cover up Sally Langton's murderous night. Fitz has plans of his own when he kidnaps Eli Pope to get information about the plane, but Olivia is the one to deliver the news. Her dad was tricked by Maya into having Fitz destroy the plane. And even more information is revealed when an NSA coder brings a recording of Sally and Cyrus to David Rose.
Yo, that was better than the way I've done it.
Than two paid actors
Over and over. Yes.
Stop.
That was pretty damn good, dude.
And why there isn't a tape of you doing the writers fucking read throughs playing Papa Pope is upsetting.
There's got to be.
I feel like
there's
you're
gotta be
so
one out
great.
there.
Who? Tell me. I honestly think, just breaking down like favorite moments of this episode, I think Sally Langton's monologues and fucking fight with Daniel
my
Douglas
God.
is like the best theater acting I've ever seen, like in my life. Like, she's screaming and then she's like, she is unbelievable.
I want to know who the writer is that wrote that. Who is the demented, like, that is hate-filled soul and spirit that who tapped into that in themselves that
Sally
wrote
a
that?
lot,
Because it's
like Piggy.
it's
Like, who's writing
ridiculous.
This shit?
God, I do remember all this. I think Fry Piggy was Matt Byrne, for
I
sure.
mean,
And then the
that's
first
insane.
one I really don't remember. I mean, I usually default
so
in these
good.
areas when it's incredible and I can't remember that. Obviously, it was Shonda. So
Right.
But also, what made that sick, right, is the editing. Right? Like,
yeah.
the way that that's sort of edited is incredible.
Yeah.
And I remember watching,
Unbelievable.
Matt Ramsey was our editor, who cut this
Yeah.
episode, who was with, he worked on Private Practice and he worked in Shondaland for an incredibly long time. And I remember after the table read, Shonda just said to him, like, can we make it like kind of weird? Like, they had a shorthand about, like, he kind of knew and he also had the, carte blanche in some ways to make something that was like a little bit like, you weren't really seeing that on that kind of stuff on broadcast TV. Like, that first
it's super
15 minutes of that
filmic.
show.
It was filmic. It was like a movie.
Oh, I was just going to say really quickly, like in the opening scene, there were shots of like Sally Langton's feet, like her taking her shoes off. And then you would hear dialogue and they would cut to a close up of their face, but they weren't talking. And it was just so interesting. But yeah, that camera work was ridiculous. Oliver is so great. We have to have Oliver on. We will, I'm sure, at some point.
Oh yeah, we have to have him on. I mean, we have to have him on.
Yeah.
It looks so good. It's edited so good. And the performances are so insane. And the writing is so good. And what I loved about sort of all the scenes in the show, and this was like indicative right of the bat, which is like, it's never like one person says there's whatever and the other person comes back or they kill. It's like you think it can't go any higher, right? Like, you think you can't possibly get any more. And like, the part I loved, she said the thing like, you're my original sin. Like, you are pretty and stupid. What you have given me is a daughter who can't keep her legs closed.
You're
like, oh shit, like
about her own daughter. Yep.
About her own daughter. You're like, well, you can't top that. And then she's like, I can't wait until you judge for your lies. But then he comes back with something, right? So it's like two like opponents.
Yeah.
The scenes are always like these two opponents who are going back and forth, and it leads to that thing. Like, I just thought she was just so good in the entire episode.
God,
and I'm also
so
like,
good.
Can you imagine having drinking every time there was a biblical reference in this episode?
Oh my God.
Dead.
Drunk. You'd
Fucking
be dead.
loaded.
You'd have alcohol poisoning. You would need to have your stomach pumped. You would be at a hospital. You would be dead. It was unbelievable. Speaking about the alcohol, we have to talk about the scenes, but we always talk about eating and actors who eat and drink are our favorite. And in this episode, I was like, there's a scene, Olivia Pope is literally, I used to be like, wow, they really make fun of Olivia Pope drinking like really big wine glasses. And in this episode was the first time I was ever like, that's the biggest fucking red wine glass I have ever seen. Like, it was a goblet. It was absolutely ridiculous. And it was delicious grape juice. Okay, Zahir, what other scenes in this episode just stick out to you performance-wise?
I could not stop watching Jeff just like bounce around things. Like, he's just and even the number of things he has to do, like, and you guys sort of highlight the scene with him and Melly is like so incredible. But just when he comes in and brings the doctor in, like, it's almost like borderline, like, insane comedy. Like, just he's so good and so tense.
And he hugs her when he hugs Sally Langston,
and
like
turns
that
her
fake
the other
hug.
way and just
Yes.
like, Sally, oh
He's
no.
like,
So good.
Sal. It's honestly like a farce or something.
Yes.
Like, it feels
And
like so crazy.
And you can watch when he's like, Sally, do you think Daniel Douglas wants this? And you can see like he's about to explode if she doesn't do this. That was really incredible. I also had worked with him so long in private practice that like I just loved Paul in everything.
We believe that Leo Bergen Leo Bergen for me personally is one of my all-time favorite Scandal characters, fucking hands down. And he's one of my favorite lines in this when he says something to Sally that's
You
like,
kill
if you murder
someone,
someone,
you call
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he susses it out, right? Like she screams, Daniel Douglas is a sodomite. And he's like, oh crap. He's like,
He's
you
in
killed
hell.
her. You killed him. Yeah,
You
he's in
killed
hell.
him. Yes.
You killed him. And like that, I can't remember who pitched it, but I remember it being like, he's excited. Like, we can fix this. We can still win. And so then he's like, yeah, you called the White House. Like, your sin is not the murder.
Yeah.
Your sin, and that's like
doesn't give a
so
shit that
indicative of
she's
this
a murderer.
show. No, the sin is that you didn't give me the opportunity to win this cleanly. If you had just called me, I would control the
Right.
situation, right? Because he knows where the power lies. And then your scenes, you guys together, particularly when you come back, and you sort of like come back to
that's
talk.
one of my cringe moments. That's one of my cringe moments.
Oh,
I always
why?
write down cringe moments. Oh, because it's so hard to watch this show when you're like the baby and the idiot, because you're like literally like on a show with Jeff Perry and fucking Kate Burton doing like Oscar, Tony, Olivier Award, Guillermo Diaz. Like, it's ridiculous. It should be raining awards on the acting level. And then I come in and I'm just like, I used to be normal. Last week I was worried about my highlights.
Stop.
You're
and I'm just
so
like,
dumb.
And the
Shut
most thing I
up.
remember shooting about that scene, which is so great, he's talking about a scene where I come back to a hotel room. Charlie and I are living in a hotel room. And I remember I had to be in bra and underwear. Always was stressful. And Tom Verica was so great. He was like, just put your knees up and we're going to make it look so, like, I was basically hidden. It was great. Like,
Yeah.
I was in my bra and underwear, but like nobody saw it, which was great. Okay. So I was cringeworthy for me. Oh, who would come up with the titles of the episodes?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, that was another free-for-all. That was like we would come
Really?
up with, and I can't remember, like roughly writers. I don't know if it was writers' table. Yeah, writer, because you guys always had titles at the table, right? Would you
Yes,
say?
always,
Okay.
always.
If you always had titles at the table, then usually once we would turn in a writer's draft or the second writer's draft, we would then sort of sit around and talk about the titles. And I'm trying to think, like, everyone sort of came up with a few. I think Chris was someone that always sort of like we thought about, like came up with like good titles on the fly, and some people sort of would sort of relinquish that. Like people like Paul would be like, I
think
have
that
no
would be-
interest in coming up with
It
that.
would be impossible. I can't come up with a fucking
Yeah.
title. That's impossible. And the titles are so funny.
So
like,
clever,
Molly,
yeah.
You and Danger Girl.
Yeah.
I can't.
Well,
like,
Yes.
one of the secrets was trying to figure out the line, right? So
Yes.
a door marked
Yes.
exit or a Molly, You and Danger Girl, right? Like these are all lines that are in the episode. So that was the
Episode,
starting
yeah.
place, was kind of trying to predict like what is the viral line. Like I don't know if you guys used to
Right.
read the sort of recaps, but like in Vulture or AV Club, like they would do like a line of the week, and like I don't know, like it was awesome if that was your line, right? Like so, I do.
How great would that be?
That's sort of like how titles, it would initially go to trying to figure out like what's the line in the episode that like Shonda will connect with or that the audience is going to connect with, and
Right.
look, that's not a
and
science.
it
but
was so like, not that it's like pop culture-y, but it's just so like perfect, like
Yeah.
tweetable or digestible,
Yeah.
or like it just nails it. It's just so fucking
some of
great.
them backfire. I one of the episodes that had my name on it was an episode called You Got Served, which was like everyone, you guys, like all the subpoenas at the beginning, but in the end of the cut, no one actually got subpoenaed. So you're just like, just sort of like
Had to
feels like a
change that.
reference to something. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just sort of
Oh my
like, this
God,
makes no
that's
sense.
So funny. Okay, I just think Candy Alexander is the most beautiful looking.
Yeah.
Her end moment where
So
she's
gorgeous.
lost in the wind, and we find out she's really the scary one, and she's the
Yup.
bad guy, and all that stuff. And then she picks up her phone, and she's like, Olivia's like, Mom, and she's just in this fucking amazing trench coat,
Her
and
hair
she
is
looks
blowing in the wind.
incredible. Her hair's blowing, and she's like, I'll see you soon, baby, or something like that. And then she just throws away the burner phone in the trash can and she walks away and you realize that she's standing in front of the fucking White House.
Yes.
Yeah. I will say that that's like an odd place to make that phone call, I think, if you're sort of wanted. But
who cares? These are the
also,
things
I would have smashed that phone up before throwing it in the garbage, right? I would have like thrown it in the water, not just like she like chucks it open into the garbage. I mean, now we're being petty.
Scandal that people had to just sort of buy, which is like I remember at the beginning, people used to be like, "There's no way that if you're in DuPont Circle that you can get to the Pentagon."
Yeah, like fuck you, dude. Just watch the show.
It's a fucking television show. Like, it's fucking fine.
That's the one where it's also like we were good at taking sort of irrational logic in one episode and then making it make sense later. So like we never did anything like that. But immediately when you say that, I go, you said you didn't smash the cell phone. If someone said that in the room, we might say like 3 episodes later, it should be like, well, actually, she didn't smash it because she wanted someone to go to that spot because there's a packet. Do you know what I mean? Like you would have, you make it work, you know, in a way. And a lot of questionable ideas in all of television and on this show have been recovered with some forward logic, some corrective logic.
I just always was so blown away at how, and I don't know if it's because the writing was so great or because our acting was so great, but I was always so blown away by like you guys making some shit up. And then people just all buying it. Like I'd be like, it literally, like I would just be like, I'd be like
giggling to myself, like they bought that shit. Yeah, I mean, it was always so good.
Sinker, you know what I mean? Like it's just crazy. Like it's just so wild.
I mean, it's a testament again to the show and what sort of people were attracted to in the beginning and what Shonda created and also what you guys bought, which is like Carrie and Olivia Pope were such compelling characters, right? And then you guys come and you like really sort of like own these characters and bring them to life where you care about, you know, Huck in this, you care about a murderer who's willing to torture his best friend in this incredibly compelling way. And so I think that I mean, that's ultimately what people care about in television, right? Like, do they really care about the how and the why? I mean, of course they do in certain shows. Like, but this also, you know, this wasn't Law and Order, and I don't know that what they're doing isn't ridiculous either. But as long as it sort of feels real and sort of the emotion always felt real to me, you know, like Jeff did insane things. You guys both did insane things on the show, but it all made sense. Like there's nothing Cyrus did that didn't make sense to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's insane, right? In this episode, it's insane to pimp out your husband so that you can get this guy in trouble so that you can then get Sally off Fitz's back so you can win an election, right? And then
it's kind of hot.
It's kind of, and the fact that he had the nerve afterwards to be like, were you mad about it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you mad that your boyfriend's dead?
Yeah.
You can go through all this and not get pictures?
Yes.
There's no way you guys remember the table read for this, but there was an entire story missing that we read at the table that doesn't exist in the show.
Really?
Yeah. So I remember this very clearly, and I remember when we cut it, and then I went back to look at the writer's draft to see. In addition to everything the crazy stuff that occurs in this episode, there was also a B613 origin story that told you about Joe's origin.
You need to get up right now and go fucking pitch that.
Go right
to ABC.
Remember,
I'm available
Katie,
as of July.
Me too. I'm available right now.
Me, Guillermo,
and
Scott
George.
Foley, Joe Morton, George Newbern, and whoever the fuck else you want. We are available. And
Katie, do you remember
this show?
We used to daydream on set of Scandal that they would do a spin-off called of B613 and we would all continue on after Scandal.
Because we loved shooting that stuff. Like we loved being at the Acme Paper.
Yes.
Like we loved being this like
Acme Paper Wonderland.
Like we just loved being a part of like, oh, I thought my acting was good at that part. I thought I did good when I was digging the tracker out of my tooth.
Oh, that was so difficult to watch.
I mean, just also think about the range of stuff you're doing, right? Like you go from like you're getting tortured to like you're having this vulnerable moment with Charlie to you're cleaning up a body. Like you cleaned up the Daniel Douglas Lewis.
I am so versatile.
That's
and I'm
right.
So
you're super
layered.
versatile. We'll be right back, guys.
Were you guys ever worried like, oh shit, like if Olivia Pope murders the vice president with a chair, like will we
Thwack.
like were there Yeah, no, like, yeah, were you Thwack? Was that the name of it?
That was the name
Thwack.
of it,
Yeah, that was the name of the episode. That's right.
That's a
Oh my God,
good
Zahir. Yeah.
title. Like, were you ever like, how are fans and gladiators going to cross her? Like, will they not be on Olivia Pope's side, or were you like, no, we've got them in the pot?
They'll
Like,
still
how
love
did you
her.
know?
Yep.
I mean, as Quinn really didn't cross OPA or Olivia at all. But you can, like, you looked in her email one time, and like the fans are like, "Oh my God, she crossed him! Kill her! Destroy her!" Right?
Death threats.
So
If you're not with Olivia, you're dead.
Right. So it's about being with Olivia. So we can justify what Olivia does. So no, I don't think that there was ever. I mean, look. Okay, well, how do we justify that she's going to kill a man in a wheelchair? Because he was in a wheelchair. Remember?
That's right.
But he said some crazy things to Olivia, right? He basically like called her like a whore and this and that, whatever, and she just had enough. So I think once you say that to Olivia Pope, the fans are like, have at it.
Kill that motherfucker. Yep, we don't care.
They're like, bye. I mean, wow. Okay, wait. We have to talk about, because we have Tony on too. Tell me about the Tony. I
Joe
am
Morton.
so uncomfortable in the Joe Morton, Tony Goldwyn opening of that scene, because he says how good Olivia is and what she tastes like. Are you joking?
God.
You do not
Who wrote
say
that?
to her father.
Who wrote that scene?
God, I wish I knew who wrote that. But I will say, like, just like I was saying before, like everything is to the highest degree. Like Sally talking about like she can't keep her legs closed, or all the when Cyrus is like, says to James, like, that baby that I bought for you. He's talking about his own daughter, and he's like, that baby that I bought for you that's in the next room. Like,
God.
so everyone on the show always went for the jugular, right? Like, the characters were always the sharpest, the meanest, right? And then as writers, you have to be the sharpest, the meanest. So you're looking to like one up the person on the next scene and be like, how can you do that thing? So it's funny rewatching that scene, which is incredible, and like obviously that's just like probably the most iconic scene to come out of this episode. I think, as far as like,
I think he won an Emmy. We were talking about he won
For
his
this
Emmy.
episode,
he won the
right?
guest Emmy this year. Yeah, you guys delivered back-to-back guest Emmy, season
Dan
2, season 3.
Bugatizzi, and then Joe Morton.
And Joe.
Katie, how many Emmys did we win? Oh, wait, none. Oh, wait, we won nothing. Anyway, go ahead, Zahir. He's brilliant. He's so freaking good in that chair. Oh, my God.
He's so good in that chair. And it does feel like it was the only thing, like thinking back to it, it's really the only leg that fits as a character has to stand on. And it's also like kind of goes with where Joe goes with the scene later, which is it's just sort of like juvenile, right? Like you went the expected route, like, and you went for the thing that you think is going to hurt me the most. But like Joe Morton just sort of can't be touched, but I think Tony plays it really well. And he obviously comes back at the end of the episode and sort of pushes him out as command. But that scene, I was on set for the rehearsal, right? I mean, I was on set the entire time, but Tom's directing it. We're watching it. We're in the rehearsal. This is exactly what happens. He does the entire thing pretty much as it is in the thing.
Off book. Off book for sure.
Oh, yeah. Off book
He's
for
off
sure.
book,
Meanwhile, he didn't have all the... He didn't have all the pages.
Oh,
so
wow.
He did something in the rehearsal where we're reading, and then I said, oh, you have the wrong thing. Did anyone give you like the goldenrods or like the double goldenrods or whatever? And he was like, whatever. So it was only like 3 lines that changed. So then he went back, changed, came back, off book, does it almost as is. He probably sings like 10% more, which is still crazy because the performance is basically a musical, right? Like he's dancing and singing through the entire thing.
He's singing Summertime and the
living's easy.
Oh, you're a little boy. And then he does like this whole section. I'm like, oh my God.
So I'm like, Tom and I, we've talked about it in tone, and like, Shonda's very specific about like, this is how I want the scene shot. And like, as like a younger writer on set, you're like, well, I want to make sure she gets exactly what she wants. And so the performance is incredible, but you do know there's like a couple things here or there that maybe you might want to see differently or whatever, or she might want an option here or there, whatever. But the crew in total stands up after the rehearsal and is clapping. So me, I'm just going like, yeah, totally. But I'm like, oh no, how do you change any part of the performance when the entire crew, like Brad, who doesn't get up at all for any reason other than the show's moving fast, he's like losing his mind. People are in tears and you're just sort of like, oh my God. Yeah. So that, I will say, like that performance, like we might not have done that but 1 or 2 other times. And most of what's in there is exactly what we did on the first take. And I think that both of them were, I think Tony was brilliant.
So he came out of the gate like that.
Came out of the gate probably 10% above what you saw.
But Katie, that's not shocking at all with Joe
No,
Morton.
he would do that shit
Like
at
he came
table
out the
reads.
gate
He's-
that way at
my
100%. Every single scene that I ever did with him,
So
like
crazy.
it's mind-boggling. It's remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't remember who came up with the like when he's like, "You're a little boy and you're a little bitch." Essentially, like you're just
I
a
think that
fucking
had to be
little
Shonda.
privileged piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like you are nothing. Like you're just. It was.
Well, I mean, I
It's so
again,
good.
I think that was Shonda, and I think it was also the crazy part about that is that sort of resonated with a certain segment of our audience was like the idea, and we touched on it much later with Joe, like just the idea that this man was brought in chains, right? This black man was brought in chains to this secret place. Yeah, he's calling the white president a boy. Just is like made him doubly, triply powerful. Like there was all of those you sort of talked about before. I think that there was a lot more like Trojan horse stuff and many, many more layers than really had to be, and that I think a lot of people understood at the time. But that, in addition to the performance and it being an amazingly written speech and Tony's performance against him really strong, there was a lot of other layers to that and a lot of talk about the metaphors in that scene too, which was really just, I don't know, top notch. I mean, he just doesn't stop moving.
Yeah.
Like it just feels like he's on like I don't even know. And Oliver, I don't know if you guys talk about him on the show as well.
No, we have to have him on. Oliver Bokelberg was our
Oliver's
DP. He directed
brilliant.
a bunch of episodes too, but he was our DP, and he is an incredible camera artist. He's just such an artist. The way he shot that show, it was not shot like a typical broadcast drama at all. This was so I'm like
This
so
was
grateful
amazing.
Zahir. This was like such a part of this show that we've not really. I mean, Shonda, we had her on and we talked
But it was
so much about
different.
the
It was
beginning of
different,
Scandal,
yeah.
like where the ideas come from, how she wrote the pilot, like casting and the first 3 weeks we shot ever and the rehearsals and all of that. But this is so fascinating, and I'm so grateful to you spending the time. And
thank you.
I could talk to you for
Thanks,
like
Zahir.
100 hours because
we have to definitely have you back on
and
for
we
the
weren't
launch
allowed
chair.
to know. Like, I still feel like you're a pretty good vault and haven't given us much.
Yeah.
But
We're gonna crack them. We're drinking
felt
whiskey next time. We're
it was
drinking
a
whiskey.
vault the
He'll
whole
open up.
time of the show too. It was a vault the whole time. We didn't know what was going on in there. We didn't know how decisions were made. We didn't know why things stuck or went away or like anything. You guys were such a little B613 amongst yourselves.
Well, a lot of it was a surprise to us, right? Like cuts, like I said, we didn't always see. And then also like we're doing it in real time. So sometimes it'd be like, I genuinely don't know the answer to the question. Like Columbus used to come up to me all the time and think that somehow he could like dance his way into getting some information out of me.
Yeah,
You're like, I don't know.
I just
I
don't
really
know,
don't know.
But
Yeah.
I would love to obviously do it again, and I love
Absolutely,
this
please.
kind of stuff terrifies me, but the reality is like
No.
You're so good.
getting the opportunity to talk about this thing again, where I made so many lifelong friends, and to talk to you guys and sort of remember some of the amazing fun we had. Like I just couldn't pass up on that opportunity,
And get
it's
to
such a
watch
huge
the
part of my
episode,
life.
right? And get to watch the show again. Like that must have been exciting.
And watch it, having the experience of watching it, knowing where it ends. So like watching David Rosen and Dan, and knowing where that's going to go in a couple episodes, which is amazing.
Yeah. Oh man.
This was the freaking best. Zahir, you're so amazing. Zahir was amazing. Thank you for coming on. And now we're going to pivot because the president of Scandal's here.
Can you believe it? Fitzgerald Grant. The Tony
The
Goldwyn
third.
is here.
The
third. Oh shit! Don't forget the 3.
Don't forget that 3. Fitzgerald Grant III is here to talk to us also about this episode because it's a big presidential episode. It's a big presidential season. All of season 3 is all about him getting reelected and if he will have a second term. And, oh my God, Tony, we're not even going to take up that much of your time because we just...
Are you kidding? To get to spend time with you guys? How awesome is this?
You look so handsome as per usual. Let the Glad haters note Tony Goldwyn is still a sight for sore eyes. First of all, I want to hear about how you're doing in your life, and you have so many things going on, coming up, and have just come out. But also, we couldn't talk about this episode without going into this freaking monologue situation. Like
crazy.
Like I
just rewatched the whole episode.
Oh, you did?
You did?
It was so
It's
fun.
so good,
Oh my
right?
God.
Oh my
It's really good. It just reminds me how crazy Scandal was.
Oh my
Like,
God.
If you think of how much story is packed into that one episode of it is so outrageous and
just in that opening scene, it's
God.
like so much going on and so like new thing, like it was super like.
We're talking
like
it's about
edgy.
the Sally Langton killing Daniel Douglas, right? Where he's been murdered in the episode before, but now we see their like big last fight and like she stabs him in the end in the back with a freaking letter opener. I mean, it is.
Yeah. But I love how they sort of go back and forth, and then you hear the characters talking, but you don't see their mouths moving. It's super like edgy, like. Oh, it's so cool. It's so interesting the way they shot it.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so Shonda.
Stop and start.
And she like made all that decisions in the cutting room. Like
she did? I'm sure, right? Yeah.
Well, like I didn't go and look at the script, but that was like classic Shonda, taking it all apart and putting it back together in some really crazy way, I think.
Would she do that with you?
Do you have experience like that because you directed so many episodes that you saw like what Shonda would do in the editing room that you were like, oh shit, like that's crazy. Like you do rip it apart and put it together.
Well, I can't remember if I ever told you guys this, but years and years and years ago when I first met Shonda, when I directed Grey's Anatomy, I had, when you direct an episode of a television show, you have like, you turn in your director's cut, right? So when I did Grey's Anatomy, I think I only directed movies, I think, up until that point. I directed a couple of movies. So I felt kind of like, well, I'm going to give my impression. So I took the episode and I made some decisions editorially that I thought, well, this scene is a little long and we'll just chop that out. And this would be better if you move this here and do that there. And I thought, give this to and I'd done the L word. And Eileen, the showrunner of that, loved that. She was like, give me your ideas. Anyway, I go and I took made some changes to the thing, and it was my opinion of what I thought would work best. Turned in the next year, they hire me back to do another episode. And the editor, I go into the cutting room and he says, before we get started, we just need to talk about something. I said, what? He said, yeah, last year Shonda was a little upset with your cut. I said, really?
Oh no.
He said, yeah, well, she really wants everything in there, and you kind of, cut some stuff and made some, and he sort of had to give me a talking to, because what Shonda wants, which not all producers want, is she wants the script exactly as written in the director's cut. So it has to have every word be in the right order and exactly what was written. And then she goes in and does whatever and rewrites the whole show in the editing room, and sometimes completely deconstructs things. But it really threw her that I had made some choices.
How dare you, Goldwyn, come in there with your own ideas in the episode.
I got in trouble.
I want to see that cut.
Yeah, for Scandal, I always did that. Yeah.
Can we see that?
I don't know. Right? Are you kidding? I don't know.
It's gone.
That's when Tom
It was the third episode of Grey's Anatomy is what it was. Yeah.
Oh wow. Interesting. And Tom Verica used to come in. That makes sense, because he used to come in and be like, shit. We just did the string together of this episode. We're fucking 19 minutes over, because we were shooting 100-page scripts for a 42-minute show, the most plot, dialogue, shit to fit in ever. And if she wants it, every single word and stage direction is in there in the correct order. I mean, that is a lot.
That's a long show. Yeah,
that is a lot. To cut out.
You turn in something that's long. You do that. But I thought it was fun actually directing. Once I knew the ground rules. So when we did Scandal, I was just like, okay, I'm going to take this script that Shonda wrote and deliver it in the tightest, best way I possibly can, with the best performances. And that's an interesting kind of like editorial assignment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know that then she's going to come in and do like what she did in 310, which is, that's like a movie length amount of story in that. There's like a whole. I was amazed when I rewatched it. I was just like, holy.
I'm so glad you rewatched it. Can you
Yeah, it was so fun.
This fucking monologue goes down in history, I think, which was why we had to have you back on. Like, we're talking Gladiators about you are a little boy monologue where
you're a boy.
You're a boy. Fitz gets, Papa Pope. He's all tied up and he's in like some really he's in like the basement of the Pentagon.
In the Pentagon?
Basement of the Pentagon, yeah.
And I mean, it's the mano. I don't even know how you would paraphrase this scene. It's
I would say Mano y hijo.
Yeah.
Mano y muchacho.
That is like.
Well, I mean,
that's
it's,
exactly right.
I blame
G.
Fitz. I blame Fitz for that monologue because you start off by just going in and telling him,
Saying,
you know,
I fuck your daughter. I screw
like,
her. You say, I
how
screw
good
her
she
all the time.
tastes.
I
and-
love the way she tastes. I get
Yeah.
her as much as I
So
can.
You
I was
had it
like,
coming. Yeah,
Oh,
he was
yeah.
like, he's just taking it in and then just
Put it this way, when I
lays into
rewatched
you.
it and Joe delivered that monologue, I went into like a 20-minute shame spiral just from hearing him say those mean things to me. I was like, wow.
do you
That was,
remember reading it in the table read? I don't. Do you? Do you remember when you first laid eyes on that
Oh,
scene?
yeah, I do.
Were you
I
terrified?
do,
Were you
but
like,
what I mostly remember is shooting it. I
Tell
remember, I sort of have a memory of the table reading thinking, wow, what an incredible thing. But when Joe unloaded on me, I was in shock. I was like, it was so intense and so theatrical. It was like operatic.
yes.
Yeah.
So I was kind of stunned at his balls in delivering it in the way that he did. Like it was super impact. I remember being like grabbing my seat and being on the receiving end of that.
I mean, he goes
intense.
into accents. He went into accents, into characters. He was like
He's singing
doing like
Summertime,
getting down low.
which are the lines with
Yeah.
Summertime and the
It
living
was-
is easy and oh, you're a little boy and like all this shit. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like it was. I knew what he was doing was brilliant. It was so theatrical. I was like, is our show gonna sustain this intense theatricality? And then I didn't understand fully what Joe was doing until I saw it later. Like I appreciate it, and I've always thought Joe's brilliant no matter what he does. But it's so deep what he's doing in that scene. Do you know what I mean? Like that's why watching it now 10 years later or whatever it is, it's very, especially all we've been through in the years since about race and
Right.
and power dynamics in our society and all of that. I didn't have a fucking clue in 2013 or whatever it was. I was like,
Yes.
I didn't understand where Joe was honestly coming from. And that's like I'm just admitting that, and now when I, in retrospect of all that we've had to process and think about and face, I watch it now and I'm like, it's very disturbing. I mean, Joe won an Emmy for that episode, didn't he?
I
Oh,
think
did he?
so.
Did he win for that one?
Yeah.
I think,
I
well,
think
he
that
won an
makes
Emmy
sense.
for guest star, right? Because
Yeah,
is
that
he
was it.
recurring at this point?
Yeah, he was guest star.
Yeah, so he won the Go Scandal. I think the year before it went to Dan Bugatinsky, and I think this season it went to Joe Morton.
For this episode, for that moment, really. Yeah, and Joe always, like what he did, which is why he so deservedly won an Emmy for that character. He just swung so hard with his point of view on Papa Pope. And it's just such good casting. He's so great.
Yeah.
It's so ballsy what he does, and I was often on the receiving end of that.
Right. Yeah.
So do you remember like preparing for your scene with Joe, or you were just like, I'm just going to show up and whatever he does is what he's going to do?
No, it was the latter. I mean, that's why I was so shocked. I mean, I prepared for it. I had my point of view. I had Fitz's point of view, and I knew Joe. I was excited to see what Joe did with the speech because it was a great monologue, But it was like being it's like being Bilbo Baggins in the den of smog, and the dragon comes out and breathes his first breath of fire at you, and you're like,
I am like, wow.
I have a feeling that there was like thunderous applause after he was done, after every take, or people were just like, oh my God, like the crew usually like bows down when he would deliver a performance like that, or anyone else.
So true.
It wasn't quite. I think people were in kind of in awe of it, but it was such a racially charged indictment of Fitz, of me, that I think it was very uncomfortable. It was like, like shit just got real.
Yeah,
and it's weird, because like Joe and I are good friends, but. And we've known each other forever and worked together many times. But being on the receiving end of that was not comfortable. It was, that was,
And you kind of see Fitz's like vulnerability, right, in his innocence, and he is like a little boy, because for him not to, all this stuff starts to sort of hit him, and it's so interesting to see him so like in again in awe and not really like not believing what Rowan is telling him. Like it's so interesting to see him so like just hit so hard with those words,
Yeah, because in a sense, it's not the whole picture, but it's all true.
Yeah,
and he's essentially saying so all these things we learned in Scandal, which like. Just like you are a white boy of privilege who didn't have to, they're the things in Scandalverse that were always like, I've worked twice as hard to get half as much is not your story. That's that's Papa Pope's story, and that's Olivia Pope's story, and that is not your story. Which, it's going to be wild watching this show back since.
Right,
like
since everything
George
that's happened.
Floyd and all of these and the Black Lives Matter movement and all this stuff, because we were before that.
Yeah.
Like we were, and even like we haven't even gotten to the lawn chair episode.
that's
we haven't
right.
gotten to any of that work.
Yeah.
Like we haven't gotten to any of that. I also think as actors, we're constantly told, I think in terms of like you being like, oh, could the show hold these choices that are like that? I think we're told all the time, like, can you be smaller? Can you be smaller?
Yeah.
Like, for those listening, like a camera really is a microscope, and sometimes facial expressions or things can look something you might do on a stage to reach the back row you wouldn't do on camera because it's too close up and it would look insane. But Joe, obviously, like, he don't give a shit.
He don't give a shit. But he's committed too. He's committed. So all that craziness just works.
God. It's
and it's totally real. That's the other thing about as actors, like if you fucking commit and it's real for you, it's going to be real for whoever's receiving. Look at Kate in the opening scene.
Ridiculous.
Say like Kate Burton too is like so theatrical, which she's doing so, or so much of what like Bellamy does is beautifully theatrical, and it's like, or so a lot of our cast is like
Jeff too, man.
In this episode, the stuff with him and Danny.
Oh
so
my
good.
God!
You didn't see the 3 6s on my forehead.
Yes.
Good. It's so fun.
The devil came in.
Have you all we always talk about food on our podcast, and people eating in episodes because G and I are obsessed with actors who eat or who don't eat. Or, you're carrying a coffee cup and it doesn't look hot or doesn't look full. But has everyone worked with barf? Because Jeff Perry did a good job in this episode throwing up.
He did a really good job throwing up.
That was some real barfing.
It was a real, he throws up because he realizes that essentially Sally Langton murdering Daniel Douglas is kind of his fault.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do some tweets of the time. Well, I really like these ones tonight because people talk some shit about Quinn, which I always love. Sissy Nene says, Quinn is, without a doubt, the worst character on Scandal.
I loved, in the beginning of the show when people would tweet like nasty stuff or mean shit to me or to any of us, I would get upset, and then I started to enjoy it. Now, I that's what cracks me up the most.
I love it. It's great. You don't want to be boring. You want people to feel one way or the other.
Someone tweeted at me once saying that Huck looks like he's constipated in every scene. They were like, he's such a bad actor. He just looks like he's constipated in every scene.
My God.
Ezra XEX tweeted, my flight number is B6 and today is the 13th. So I feel like I'm on Scandal. So B613, wish me luck.
Cindy Caponera, CC Cap tweeted, I'm going to yell a monologue at you about who I am and who I'm not and why I am that way. Hashtag Scandal.
Maurice Kreisman tweeted, a reality show competition based on Scandal in which the loser of the week goes home to the tagline, you're not a gladiator anymore. That's good. I like that.
And this is true. At Shinmo1, Mike S. wrote, I hate my winter coats. If only I had an assortment of winter coats like Olivia Pope. I feel like that to this day. Never, ever has there ever been a better coat, bag,
so many coats, so many gloves,
television.
So many bags.
Oh,
who has the time? Where did she have the time to shop? This is the busiest woman in DC, and she had all the most amazing clothes.
Next week, listeners, next up, we're at episode 311 called Ride, Sally Ride. Another
good one.
Title.
Thank you, gladiators. Thank you guys for listening.
Bye.
Thank you guys for joining us on Unpacking the Toolbox. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, share with your friends, rate, or leave us a review.
Scandal is executive produced by Sandy Bailey, Alex Alche, Lauren Homan, Tyler Klang, and Gabrielle Collins. Our producer and editor is Vince DeJohnny, with music by Chad Fisher.
Scandal is a production of ABC Signature, and you can follow along by rewatching Scandal on Hulu.
Unpacking the Toolbox is a production of Shondaland Audio in partnership with iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from Shondaland Audio, visit the iHeartRadio app or anywhere you subscribe to your favorite shows.